What? A Premiere Pro color grading tutorial? Now I know all of you DaVinci Resolve bros are gonna come at me in the comments, but that's okay. It's okay if someone wants to color grade in Premiere Pro and not in DaVinci Resolve. Yes, I admit that Resolve does have the superior color grading tools, but sometimes you're in the flow of the project and you just want to do some real quick color grading just to get the project done and out the door. So in today's tutorial, we're going to go over how to edit D-Log footage in Premiere Pro. Whether you're aware of it or not, log footage is a color profile. It's called a flat color profile because there's almost no contrast and no saturation. What this allows you to do is it allows you to draw out the contrast and the saturation to the levels that you desire, instead of having that baked into the final file like you would get with shooting with a normal cell phone. And I know that the new iPhones can shoot log, but most people don't have those phones. Now in this tutorial, I do use what's called a LUT, a lookup table. LUTs just expand the color information correctly outward so that you get more contrast and more saturation. I provided the LUT that I use and the footage that I use in the comments section down below. Before we get into this tutorial, take a look at this graph right here. Most of you aren't subscribed. If you like my content and you want to see more of it, please subscribe down below. Please and thank you. Download the shot and let's get started. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and set up a timeline here, and I have this nice drone shot that I took a while back. I did this on a DJI Phantom 3 SE, and it was taken in D-Log. So the first thing that I need to do is set up my workspace. Now you can come over here to Window, Workspaces, and go to the Color workspace. So if I click on that, you can see the Lumetri Color window over here, and I'm actually just gonna then move this over to the left side of my screen because I prefer that. And I will go ahead and rearrange. Let me say why I arrange my workspace this way. It's because I like to be able to see what I'm working with, of course. And I also want to see the scopes, this Lumetri scopes here. If you don't have this window, you can come up to the window and Lumetri scopes and just make sure that that is checked on. I also like to have the full screen view of the Lumetri Color panel. And I need easy access to my effect controls. Let me just rearrange these two here as well. So I need all of these while I'm color grading. Usually I color grade on 2 monitors, but because of this tutorial, I'm just keeping everything on this one monitor. Now let's hop over to the Lumetri scopes, and you can see the color here. And as I scroll through, you can see the color shift in the Lumetri scopes. Maybe I don't want to see the Lumetri scopes. Maybe you want to see the histogram. You can just right click on the scopes window and change to the histogram, and it'll show that, and then right click and turn off the parade. Or maybe I want the waveform, which is great. You can see how that works too. I generally work with the parade because I like to see my red, green, and blue channels on their own. So now that I've got all that set up and explained the scopes there a little bit, let me select my clip so that my Lumetri Color here is active. I'm going to use an input LUT. I made a D-Log to Rec 709 Gamma 2.2 LUT. If you don't have this LUT, you can actually force the colors to be where they are, but I'm going to use this to show you what's going on. So if I select this LUT and click Open, you can see how the color then stretches out, and you can see our image. Now there's tons more saturation, there's a lot more brightness, there's more contrast. So one way to achieve this look without a LUT, if you didn't have that, would be to come here into the curves, and I could just pull the black side of the curve down, and I can pull the bright side of the curve up. We essentially get the same look, but you can see how much information has been lost when we look at our curve, because if there's a straight line, that's just essentially lost information. So I'm going to reset this, and I'm going to bring back my LUT. The first thing that I'm going to do is come to my curves, and I'm just going to pull this black side of my curve over to the right until we start getting the tips of my RGB parade touching the bottom line. I'm going to bring this back a little bit because I don't want it to be too intense. And now I'm going to add a nice S-curve. Because I can look at the top of my RGB parade and see that there's a lot of my shot that is peaking because we're looking into the sun. It's okay that it's peaking, but I just need to be aware of that. And you can see that as my shot goes through, all of a sudden down here is way too underexposed. But that's okay, we're gonna fix that in just a minute. So this is my shot now. I like the correction that we've done. Let's do two things really quick. The first is I want to switch this green color and make it a little bit more blue. So I'm going to close my RGB curve over here, and then I'm going to select this green color using the color picker on the hue versus hue curve. And then I'm going to pull it down, and you can see that that introduces more blue. But the problem is it's only looking at these areas right here. So we need to broaden this out. So I'm going to move this over. This just takes a little while to make sure that we're grabbing all of the hues. So now you can see that I have this nice curve here. I'm going to get rid of this point. The fewer points we have, the better off it's going to look in this point. And now you can see that this hue shift here really brings out the reflectiveness of the water and the clouds. But it makes an issue when we look at the sun, where the sun right here actually turns green. So this is where we start getting into a little bit more complex things, where we're going to start keyframing our color grade. So I'm going to start maybe right about here, where things start to maybe darken off a little bit as we start looking into the sun. I'm going to go to my effect controls, and underneath basic correction, I'm going to add a shadows keyframe. And then I'm also going to go down to my color wheels and match tool, and I'm going to add a keyframe there. Now let's go to the end of our clip here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and counteract the green. The way we counteract green is by adding in the opposite color. So here in my highlights, I'm going to look and I see that green is here, so I'm going to add in pink. Let me shift this over into the pink, and if I scrub my timeline back, you can see that this little point moves, which is great, but it doesn't move in a straight line. It kind of moves in a curve. So halfway through here, where I see that my highlight of the sunlight here is getting a little bit green for my taste, I'm just going to pull this down more into the pink hues. And now I'm also going to increase my shadows like this, which is going to bring out all of this color information down below. Given how we shifted the hues over here, we have this very purple tint down here in the bottom, and this is all in shadow. So let's do the same thing that we did before. I'm going to hit this little keyframe button here, and I'm going to go back to the very first keyframe, and I'm going to move this little shadows crosshair just enough to give it some information. And now I will go here to the end, and I'm going to counteract pink by adding in green to our shadows. And you can see the difference that this makes. I can come over here to the Lumetri Color tab, and looking at the color wheels mix and match, I can turn it off and turn it on, and you can see the difference. That looks much better. The one problem that we are having is we're dealing with some oversaturation, especially down here in the bottom. So I'm going to come over to the saturation slider. I like the saturation at this point. Click to the end. I think I might desaturate this just a hair. But right here where the sun flare goes through the image, this is way too saturated. It looks like something crazy is happening. So I'm just going to pull the saturation back on that. Maybe something like 70%. and that just helps that out there. So let's watch our shot. So I think that this looks really, really good. There's some things that I would change. I would probably bring down the overall exposure in the shot. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's bring the exposure back, maybe to -0.5. I think that that just feels better overall. But in bringing back the exposure, we've actually darkened things back for our shadows. I'll go back here to my shadow slider, go to the final keyframe, and I'll input a number 150. Because the slider only goes up to 100, you can actually bring that number higher than what the slider allows. I think that looks better. In the future, we'll do some other color grading tutorials in Premiere Pro as well as DaVinci Resolve. I do hope that this has been really helpful for you. If it has, consider liking the video and subscribing down below. If you have any comments, questions, or even suggestions of future tutorials, please go ahead and leave them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.